Hello friends, I'm Daniel Nesbitt, and we are back with another episode of Designing a Sans Serif Typeface. Now, if you caught the last episode, one of the things that I mentioned as we were wrapping up the lowercase was that I wanted to leave the lowercase a and the lowercase s as its own separate video. So here we are in our own separate video. And in this one, what I want to do is not only show you how I design an S, which I would imagine might be the most popular reason why you're here, but I also wanted to show off a neat little trick with the A. I had mentioned that we had the option of doing a single story lowercase a and a double story. And rather than deciding one or the other, I wanted to jump in and do something a little bit different where we would have an alternate lowercase a. Now I chose the A because that's typically what I reach for the most with alternates, and down the line I may decide to do more, but I figured this would be a good start in the meantime. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start out, and I'm actually going to create the stylistic alternate. And we're going to do that by, I just did Command-Shift-G on my keyboard. We're going to type in A and then .ss01, so stylistic alternate 1. And automatically glyphs will put that on the end here. Now, one extra step that we need to go and do is under our font info, under features. We just want to go through, and I'm going to hit the update button on the bottom here. And what this is going to do is this is automatically going to throw in some code here that basically says we have a stylistic alternate that is an A. And as we add more, we can go back and triple check that this is going to be updating, but it should be generated automatically if everything is working correctly. So now we've got two A's that we can fill here. And diving in here, we can basically just go ahead and start working on an A. So what I want to do here to start is I'm going to grab my O here. And we're going to use that, and what I'm deciding here, at least to start, is that I'm going to do a single story for the main lowercase a, if we want to call it that. And all I'm going to do for this is just use a few pieces from the O and the I, the lowercase I, to put this all together and basically get a lowercase a going on. And then, like before, you're probably used to this, but we want to make sure that this area here and here doesn't look so thick. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab a couple of handles here and a node, and I really don't think I need to bump that in much. So already, we've got a pretty good looking lowercase a. And then the last thing I'm going to do is just do some side bearings. And for now, I'm just going to stick with 60 and 80. And we'll go from there. Now, one thing that I need to just take a look at here is just kind of how this is spacing out with everything else. And I think for how this is working, I think that'll be okay. And I kind of like that little flare off to the bottom there as well. So we're going to stick with that, and we're going to call that our lowercase a. That was pretty easy, right? So how do we go through and do the alternate? So if I jump back here in edit mode on the A, down in the bottom corner, when we went through all of those steps in the info palette, we opened up a new features option down here, which you probably never saw before if you look back at any of my previous videos. But one of the things that we can look at here is the stylistic set 01. And when I select that now, you'll notice that my old A went away. Now the rest of my font, just to show you how this works here, the rest of my font is still there. This is just allowing us to switch back and forth. So we can go through and we can pop up that secondary A now and take a look at that. Now, to start with this, I have to make a decision here about how I want to assemble this letter, because I've got a few things going on. One of the first things is I don't really have an upside down hook like this in anything, and I really don't have this part here. So effectively, I am kind of making up some new pieces here. What I was originally looking for was something that I could maybe start out with to at least get us on the right track. And I think what I'm going to do for that is I'm just going to do what we did for the other lowercase a, and we're just going to effectively recreate it for a moment, which is fine. Now, I can go back here and I can kind of take out some things that I really don't need. So I'm going to use this as kind of that upper hook. And we're going to go and we're going to get rid of some handles here. So I just have an open piece. If I did this right. It's always a trick to getting it to hook. Try this one more time. And if all else fails, I just do a cut on the keyboard, but I think that should work. There we go. So we got to where I want it to be. So with that, we're going to move this back into place. Now, one of the things already off the bat is obviously that's way too much curve. That's going to be a pretty gnarly A there, if you will. So I think what I want to do is I'm maybe going to revisit this a little bit. So let's try something different. Let's go over to the lowercase c. Because one thing I like about the lowercase c is it's got this angle here, which kind of helps keep things a bit more open. And I'm kind of thinking, if this works the way I think it will, that this might look a little bit better. So we'll do the same as we did before there. Close that up. And I like this because this gives us a little bit more room to work with underneath this curve here. One thing I am going to do though is I am going to adjust these curves just a little bit so that everything kind of plays a little bit nicer. And down here, I think I can get away with just a little bit of overlap there as well. Perfect. So just going to stay on top of my side bearings as well. We'll do 60 and 80 again. So that doesn't look too bad. Now granted it does have some work, but I think I can live with that. So for the bottom portion of this, I'm just going to go through and use the lowercase o to kind of wrap things up here a little bit. So we'll go through, and then what I want to do, first as a quick reminder, we've got 70 on the top and 85 on the sides. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to grab this part up here, and I'm just going to bring this down to kind of where I'm thinking I want to aim this at. This isn't going to look pretty right away, but we're not worried about that yet. We'll kind of bring this over like that, which gives us a little bit more of an even shape, and then I'm going to pull this in a little bit as well. So this does look a little bit hairy, which I was expecting. That's fine. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off that portion, and then we're just going to connect everything back up. And I'm going to kind of do this in a rather hasty manner because I really don't know how much of this is going to look the way I want. But we'll see kind of how this evens out here a little bit. So what I'm envisioning in my mind is that this portion is just going to go straight in like that. And I'm also going to correct my path directions just to keep everything on the up and up there. So I'm thinking that part's going to go straight in. And then for this part on the bottom, I think just a simple curve would do the trick. So we're going to put the Bezier handles back in there, try and get them a little bit even there. And then effectively just find a pleasing way for this to cycle up into that corner there. Now one thing I'm already looking at is this does look a little bit on the square side. So we're going to back off over here a little bit. Might even go a little bit more. And then we kind of move these out a little bit. It is going to have a little bit of a square feature to it, but that's okay. So looking at this, I'm just going to do one other thing here as well, because it does feel a little bit wide to me. So I'm thinking what I might do using this N for reference here is I'm going to back off the width a little bit. So we're back in maybe that much. Kind of adjust all of our points here as well. Just get a nice pleasing curve there. One thing I think I am going to do too, as I'm looking at this, is I am going to give this just a little bit of a curve. I don't think it needs to be much, but just something subtle to kind of loop it around there. I think that'll look nice. So I'll get these points lined up a little bit as well, just to kind of give that a little bit more curve. I'm also going to move these up a little bit more. And then for this point, I'm actually going to move it back just a little bit. And then just kind of move these down. So it feels like it's a little bit more of a natural curve. And it's also about the same width as the end too, which I think I like that a little bit better. And then jumping back in, we're just going to go with these side bearings again. It'll be the same side bearings, which I would really prefer to try and keep them that way if I possibly can. We'll see how that works. I may actually bring this, you probably noticed me already doing it as I was about to say, but I think I'm going to bring these points up just a tad as well. Just make that kind of feel a little bit looser there. I'll also kind of bring that up a little bit too, just make that curve feel a little bit more natural. The tough part here is that you've got two different designs here that are kind of going on, but 70, 85, 70 there, that's 70 there, and all the way across. Oh, hopefully I got that right. I think I do though. If I zoom in here, yeah, it says 85 there, so we should be good there. So there we go. That's a lowercase a with a stylistic option. So we can go back and forth between those two. And I think that's going to be a really neat feature of this face. And I can't say for sure that I've decided that this is how it's going to be between the alternate and the regular one. I may end up switching these around depending on how I feel as we get a little bit farther. But I really like how this is looking, and even kind of how this is reading at a lower point size. So just kind of jumping back and forth there, I think we're looking pretty good. One thing I'm just going to triple check though, the eye really was 80. Interesting. Well, I think for now, I think that'll be fine. So beautiful. We have our A. So now on to the fun one, the lowercase s. I'm sure this is what everybody's been just dying to see me do. So I'm going to use an O here as my basis. Now the trick with an S is I really don't want to have very many points here. It's easy to get carried away, and it's easy to overdo things a little bit. One of the things that I need to consider right off the bat is how I want the terminals on the S to be. Now I could have them at a parallel line to the baseline or to the X height here. But I think what I want to do, if I bring up the C here, is I want to continue with this angle, which I think was close to a 45, maybe it was a little more or less. I really wasn't counting, but regardless, I want to keep that angle consistent. So I'm also going to go ahead and just grab that and bring that over as well. So I've got a couple things going on. Actually, I think what I'm going to do to make things a little bit easier is I'm just going to go ahead and we're just going to chop this up a little bit. Ideally, what I'm after here, I'm sorry you have to watch that because I want to make sure that I get it at 90 degrees, but I'm too lazy to switch my my setting there. Can't believe I just did that on camera. Anyway, we'll get these points lined up, and then I'll explain what I'm after here in just a moment. So get that, we'll bring that down, and just have to do a quick memory jog here. I believe that was 15 points, or was that 10 points? No, it was 15 points. So that should get me even for the overshoot. So when I'm designing an S, pretty much what you're seeing here is the handles that I like to have available to me. I'm going to kind of do some moving around here a little bit because I also want to get the shape a little bit more in line here. So this is going to look really, really goofy for a moment, but you'll see where I'm going. So this point is going to connect to this point. That point's going to connect to that point. We'll throw a few S's off to the side here, and one other thing that I'm going to do real quick is I'm just going to check my width as well, because I think this is going to end up being a little bit wider, but this at least gives us a start. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to throw in some handles on each of these, and you can already start to see how this is going to take shape a little bit. So these are effectively the points that I'm going to use to then bend this S into the shape that I want. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to go through and I'm going to get these points right where I want them. And really, as I go here, I probably don't need to grab the entire arch here, but I just want to be sure that I'm getting things right where I need them to be. So since my alignment isn't auto-aligning the way I want, we'll just end up doing it this way, which is fine. There we go. So this is, it looks italicized, of course, but what this is telling me is this is pretty much where I want these points to line up when I'm going about this here. So with those out to there, we're going to kick these out to about there. We'll kick that one out to about there. It's one of those deals where it looks like you got it and then you don't. But here we go. Oh, I was so close. So close. Two points off. There's got to be some sort of bonus for that. Maybe I get a cookie or something at the end of this. All right, so the next step here is I'm just going to go through and make things a little bit more even. So I'm taking the handles on this side and just making sure that they're loosely the same as the ones on the other side. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this handle up here, and I want to get it in line with this handle there. Do the same here as well. So now I'm getting a little bit more of the shape that I want, and basically all that I can need to do from this point is you can really start to see how this is going to start shaping up pretty quickly. And at this point, it's just a matter of moving points around. And the other thing that I like to try and do as much as I can, doesn't always work out this way the best per se, but is making sure that I'm trying to get as many of these points as even as possible to start. I found that that makes life just a little bit easier for me. So we'll get those lined up. And for these, we're going to move them down. We'll just kind of taper that off a little bit. Move this point up. Get it to snap there. And again, all I'm looking for is just an even weight all the way around here. And this does take a little bit of finessing. But we're kind of getting there. So I don't think I need the O anymore, which is nice because it does get kind of annoying. But I'm going to keep an S or two off to the side here. And actually, what I'm also going to do is just type out a word as well, just to give me a little bit of context here. Because I may make decisions like going back, and this is where you kind of get into the visual pieces a little bit of how much do you technically make a letter the same width versus you just make it, kind of give it that optical illusion. And in this case, I'm going to aim more on the optical illusion side. The other thing that I'm going to do is just relax that spine, this chunk, a little bit more. So the trick with the S is we've got the top and we've got the bottom at 70. We've got this at 85. We've got that at 85. I want to keep this as close to 85 as I can. The reason that I'm doing that, I was actually pretty close. The reason that I'm doing that is with the S, that's where you get your weight. And I think for 85.5, I'm going to settle with that. So the thing is, that's where your weight is. So you can't really think of it in terms of a square or a circle so much. You really do have to think of it in the form of an S shape. And what's happening is the two ends, it's effectively a line, and the two ends are going to be your tapered points. And those should be pretty close to 70 as well, I think. 72, yeah, which isn't too far off. And that does kind of keep that taper up through here. But then as you start getting down into the meat and potatoes of the S, the main part, the spine, that's where you want it to start thickening up, because you don't have vertical or horizontal strokes that you can rely on. You don't have a circle that's going to get thick on the sides. So that's where your work really needs to be done with the S. And I think that's why it gets so tricky with people, because oftentimes you see a deal where, just to emphasize a little bit, people might go and make that part look a little bit thin or something like that. You actually want to keep a little bit of the thickness there. The trick too is also making sure that you've got how things are tapering off just right as well, because you don't want to have it going 70 all the way too much, and 70, 70, 70, 70, and then have it go in. It should be a gradual step here. So we're still at about 85, and that does kind of do just what I was talking about a little bit. So what I think I'm going to do is, the other thing that I'm looking at is I'm seeing how this part feels like the apex is around here and here, which would make sense because those are where my points are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bump those around just a little bit to try and help me out some. The other thing that I'm going to do, and we talked about this on the X, was giving this some direction too. So I'm also going to go ahead while I'm at it and bump the top part up a little bit. The other part that I did as well, which I didn't mention, but you may have noticed, was if I flip this upside down, you'll notice that the bottom, which is this bigger part up here, is bigger than the top part. And again, it's giving us that visual weight. So that looks a little bit better. So one thing that I'm looking at here is it looks like my spine got a little too thick. But just kind of doing some checks. So again, here we're getting up to the 90s. And I mean, I'm trying to draw this as straight across as I can. I know in some cases it's going to be what it is, which could be okay. But I think we're getting there. Let me try and relax that a little bit, just kind of see how that looks. There's going to be a bit of back and forth here, just making sure that I'm getting this the way I want. The other thing that I'm just going to do too, this is thinner than the S, but there's a part of me that feels that it looks a little bit thicker than the S. I may just bump, or the N I should say. I'm just going to bump that in a little bit more. And we'll just see where that takes us. See, visually that looks a little bit better, I think. I think we're going to roll with that. The other thing I'm going to do is I just want to run a quick test here to see how much I can taper off this and angle this and still make it look like it's not too bad. Just kind of bring it up a little bit. That's all we needed to do. And honestly here we're just getting into micro adjustments too, but I mean really after only a few minutes of work you can see how that's really starting to clean up. We've got a nice look and feel to this. I like the more angled spine here versus when it was almost getting a bit more horizontal there. I wonder if actually I still have that in my... Oh, maybe I don't. But I mean to me that looks a little bit better. I think that's going to work fairly well. So just doing a quick test for funsies. It's not terrible. I may even dial this back a little bit more. I am kind of going through and purposely breaking a few rules here and there. But I'm okay breaking the rules if it's all for the good. And now what I'm looking at is I'm just looking down at my lower sample here, which I suppose I could bring this up just a little bit, but basically what I'm doing is I'm kind of doing a blur test, which there's a handy little feature, this slider here. And effectively what we're looking at is we're looking at the weight. So does this S look like it's got more weight to it than the letters around it? And I mean, it's close. It's close. Could there be a bit more? Maybe that helps a little bit. So gonna just kind of help the taper out there a little bit that I was talking about earlier. And just kind of see if that helps things out a little bit. I think it does, to my untrained eye. It still has a little bit of an angle thing going on here, and this just might be me needing to go and play with this a bit more. But what I'm seeing here is that we've got this nice curve here, and then it does go into a sharper curve. Actually, if I turn on Speed Punk, that probably confirms exactly what I'm thinking, that we've got that uneven shape to it there. So if I just kind of go in, and for giggles, I'm just going to play with Speed Punk here, and we're just going to see if we can kind of get this a little bit more even. And we'll see what this does to the actual, because one thing I'm noticing is it's already ballooning up that. Technically we're getting a good curve there, but it's just not doing what we need it to. So this kind of helps line things up a little bit better. It's also just a really nice way to know where things aren't working. So if I turn this back off, you'll notice we do get the curves a little bit better, but now I've got that problem in the middle with the spine. So one thing that I can do is I could go through and I can keep messing with these. And, you know, I'm probably going to throw off my curves there. The other thing that I've seen people do, we'll give this a try, and this is usually more of a last case or a last ditch scenario, but it kind of helps clean things up a little bit, is if you find yourself still needing that extra little bit of help, you can go through and just throw in a couple extra points here to get things to shape up a little bit more. And as much as I was trying to avoid doing that, that may end up actually helping me out quite a bit. I usually don't aim for this. Usually I try and do this as much as I can with these 2 points, but sometimes you just need to hold that shape a little bit better. So now if I take a look here, I didn't even see what I put that to, but it looks like I'm about 80 there. I'll bump that up a little bit more and just get her pretty much 80 on the nose. I don't think that's too bad, honestly. It's one of those things that I just, after going through and preaching about everything I just was, I think this might be a situation where it works a little bit nicer. So we'll go through, we'll kind of get these pieces shaped up a little bit better here. So with those lined up a little bit more, and then what I'm also going to do is just come back here. I'm going to move these, I'm moving these points just to be probably in line even. I'm going to throw Speed Punk back on one more time. Let's just see how good we got this, because I don't think, and yeah, this is kind of confirming what I was suspecting. I don't think we were that far off. And really, I'm pretty pleased with how this looks. Down here, I mean, really, we're just getting into tweaks now. And yeah, even there, I don't think I was too terribly far off. So these are looking like I've got some pretty smooth curves there. I'm okay with that. So we'll just kind of get those put together a little bit. I'm just going to turn Speed Punk back off. And really, it's not too bad. I'm just going to misspell my own word here for a moment, but you know, I'd say it's a pretty solid S. Again, I could go through, I could do a bit more work and finesse this a little bit more. And I'm sure that I will as we go through this series. That's the thing about typefaces. As you go back and you're doing more of these edits, you start using this in words, you start using this in paragraphs and titles and whatever else that you think you might use your typeface in. Certain things come to light as you go, and eventually you figure out what needs to change or what needs to tweak. But as I'm looking at this, just for a first draft, first pass, lowercase, for a sans serif, I think we're looking fairly solid. We do have a bit of work to go yet. I know this is probably a little bit deceiving, but for the lowercase, I think we're in a good place. We can probably start doing some testing with some sentences and things of that nature, and really start to see how this shines, if we need to make any adjustments, how we're kind of feeling about all these different shapes and everything. But for next episode, I think what I'm going to do actually is switch over to the uppercase. Again, like the lowercase, I think we can probably rattle off most of that pretty quickly, so it should be a pretty exciting episode. So as always, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you liked this episode, if you found something helpful in it, then I always appreciate a like and a like and a comment. We already covered the subscribes. Because as always, as much as this is about me learning typeface design and showing off what I know about typeface design, I also want to make this a place for others to be able to share in that experience as well, and to learn things and take away things that I might not know or might not be just sharing or teaching right now. So, as always, I appreciate you taking the time to watch, and I will catch you in the next episode.